Gojo Satoru is a beautifully ironic character. After some of the most recent chapters of Jujutsu Kaisen, a lot of misconceptions about Gojo's character began to surface. However, I'm here to explain why he's the best written character in the series, by far. Before we get started, this video will obviously contain spoilers, so if you haven't caught up to the manga or somehow live under a rock, drop a like, come back later. As we all know, the anime and manga side of the internet was completely taken over by the Gojo vs Sukuna battle, with the battle chapter length of 14 chapters from chapter 223 to chapter 236. Gojo vs Sukuna was the longest battle so far in Jujutsu Kaisen, stripping that title away from Mahito vs Yuji, which ironically was also the second best battle in the entire series. Sadly, the ending of the battle was met with mixed criticism in chapter 236, as many people felt like Gojo's character was ruined and turned into a classic, quote, Goku.
Hey, no, stop, just calm down.
Now, for the record, the other criticism that Gojo was off-screen, and whether you like the decision or not, it's still a valid criticism. Gojo's character being ruined, however, not really so much. I believe that it's both rooted in a vast misunderstanding of the core of Gojo's character and predicated on one line from Nanami where he tells Gojo, "You live for Jujutsu. You don't wield it to protect something. Use it solely for the sake of satisfying yourself. You're a weirdo." This is actually Nanami misunderstanding Gojo, just like many of the other readers as well. And honestly, I don't blame you guys. A lot of this was pretty subtle, but let me explain it to you. Gojo has been hailed as the strongest in the verse. This was his title, not only given to himself by others, but by himself as well. The reason for Gojo's strength is due to the six eyes and limitless ability. He certainly trained hard to master these abilities, but these abilities are undeniably what makes Gojo so powerful. As Gojo states himself, a Jujutsu sorcerer's skill set is 80% innate talent. However, this very power that made Gojo, quote, the strongest, is also what led Gojo into isolation. Before, Gojo was able to identify with Geto, hence why they became best friends. Before fully mastering his abilities and understanding the core of cursed energy, Gojo and Geto were labeled as the strongest together. They would both say, "We're the strongest." However, after their fated battle with Toji, this all began to change. Not only did Toji defeat both of them, but Gojo's near-death experience not only allowed him to understand the core of cursed energy, unlock reverse curse technique, red and hollow purple, it also allowed him to fully master his abilities. After his battle with Toji, Gojo was able to keep his infinity on at all times, while refreshing his brain with reverse curse technique in order to make sure that he would never be caught off guard again. Not only that, but he mastered his other abilities such as red, teleportation, and even domain expansion. Once he mastered all of this, Gojo by himself had become the strongest. Geto and Gojo were no longer the strongest together, but instead, Gojo alone, and this is a pivotal point in Gojo's character. Here begins his isolation, and where a lot of viewers became confused with the chapter of chapter 236. When Nanami again states that Gojo only used Jujutsu to satisfy himself, even Geto agrees and says, "You clearly admitted to it earlier just now." Geto said this because Gojo, despite the fact that he died and lost, said that he had fun and was even sorry that Sukuna wasn't able to give it his all. This is where the confusion lies, because fans do not realize that the reason Nanami and even Geto said this is because they do not understand Gojo. Now, hold on. I know what you might be thinking. Isn't Geto Gojo's best friend? Surely he would understand Gojo better than anyone else, right? Yes, he would, but only whenever they were still teenagers together. Recall back to what I had said previously. Geto and Gojo were no longer the strongest together, but instead, Gojo alone. Here begins his isolation. In chapter 236, Gojo states, "I love everyone, and I don't feel lonely now. But somewhere along the way, there was a line I drew, not as a human, but as a living creature." That somewhere along the way is whenever Gojo became the strongest, when he is able to literally put an infinite distance between him and everyone else after mastering his limitless and infinity. The very thing that brought him power and the title of the strongest also brought with it the isolation, the loneliness that follows. No one could understand Gojo anymore, not even Geto. Gojo even says, "You can make a flower bloom, you can admire it, but you can't tell that flower, 'I want you to understand me.'" Gojo had simply become too powerful, and the chasm between him and everyone else had become, well, infinite. So Nanami and Geto saying Gojo only wanted to satisfy himself is simply wrong. They did not understand Gojo because they couldn't understand Gojo. After all, how could they? How could anybody? How could anybody but Sukuna? He could do anything he wanted. Geto even realizes that when they argue in front of KFC about his newfound ideology. Whenever Geto wanted to rid the world of non-sorcerers, Gojo said it was impossible. But Geto responds by saying, "You could do it, Satoru. You're trying to convince me that it's impossible when you yourself could do it. If I could be you, wouldn't my impossible ideal become possible?" Geto couldn't even fathom what it would be like to be able to achieve his dream with Gojo's power. This is why some of Gojo's final thoughts were actually of Sukuna, because he was the only one in years who could finally reach him, both literally and metaphorically. Even when powerful disaster curses such as Jogo and Hanami used domain amplification, it only nullified Gojo's divinity because he allowed it to. Gojo was still too powerful. They couldn't nullify his infinity. They couldn't breach that chasm, but Sukuna did. Not only that, Sukuna was able to, while Gojo threw everything he had at him. He says, "I wanted to convey everything to Sukuna. I wanted him to know." He wanted Sukuna to know because no one else could. Had Gojo used this much effort against literally anybody else in the verse, he would have won before even giving a fraction of the effort. Gojo losing, being thankful it was to someone stronger, and even feeling bad for Sukuna isn't ruining his character, but rather enriching him and giving him more depth. Though Sukuna was evil, he was still the only character in the verse who could truly understand Gojo after years of solitude. Why would he not be thankful? Why would he not give pause to the fact that he couldn't give Sukuna what Sukuna gave him? Feeling sympathy for the enemy isn't ruining a character. Wanting more than just to be a good guy who saves everyone doesn't ruin a character. These things enrich and make a character more than just an archetype. These things make a character beautiful. Gojo is one of these beautifully ironic characters. A man who strived to become the strongest to protect people, reached his goal only for the power to bring him isolation from the very people he loved and wanted to protect. He didn't just protect them because he loved them too. He nurtured them to be able to reach his level of strength. At first we think that's simply because that's what a teacher would want, right? The whole student surpass the master thing, right? And of course, tell foster the youth to help change Jujutsu society. But after now fully understanding Gojo's character, we realize he also wanted his students to reach his heights so that he wouldn't be alone anymore. A little selfish in his motivations? Sure, but also very human. Gojo doesn't have to be perfect. He just needs to be human, to us, the readers. Giving him flaws, selfishness, and seeking more than just being good makes him beautiful and makes him the best written character in all of Jujutsu Kaisen. Now, for the record, you don't have to agree with my interpretation of Gojo's character, nor do you have to agree with my interpretation of the text from chapter 236. But if you are going to say it ruins Gojo's character, just make sure that your argument for why it does is consistent with everything else that Gojo did within the story. Because I see a lot of people saying it ruins his character while leaving out a ton of super important character points. Now, if you guys enjoyed this video, then subscribe and look forward to more long form content just like this. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Thank you.
Gotta get it, homie, gotta move it. If you gonna do it, man, hope I never jug it. God, everybody just nobody really do it. None, I don't want this stuff, you know, hear me. I got the name, if we know you, no job, I get the break.